This week, Activision Blizzard got the legal go-ahead from their respective court to bend the knee to Bill Gates. Then, Baldur's Gate's release is on the horizon, and we talk about what you might be able to expect in the game come August. We also talk about timekeeping, unionization, the Emmys, and then we talk an awful lot about vampires.
Nick here, and topologically speaking, I'm essentially a funnel.
Hi, I'm Josh, and thanks to Far Cry 6, I now know that chorizo is life.
And I'm Andy. You are checking out Video Game Tango.
Rewind. No.
We're not rewinding.
No.
Hey, everybody.
Fast forward.
We're back.
We've got a bit of a case of fuck arounds. It's like usually we get started about an hour earlier than we are now. So we're at the point where we're usually wrapping up the podcast and we're in a state.
It's Friday.
Yeah.
We've been here for 2 days.
It's Friday, baby. Fuck. All right. So
What?
we've got I showed you last week. It's never mind. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, man. So, okay.
around.
We are already really off the rails. Okay. So you guys know we talked a little bit in the past about Activision Blizzard and their acquisition by Microsoft.
Oh, yeah?
It's come up once or twice, I think.
A couple times, I think. Yeah, well, you know what happened? It got approved. And by approved, I mean the FTC injunction was denied.
Yes. A judge today in San Francisco, one Jacqueline Scott Courtley in San Francisco has disagreed with the FTC and doesn't feel that it is going to be harmful to cloud gaming and that it shan't hurt either Nintendo or Sony, the market leader, in its console wars. She does not see it as an unfair advantage.
Indeed. So there's still problems in Europe with the CMA. So the CMA has previously ruled against the acquisition of Activision Blizzard to Microsoft. Right now, the powers that be at Microsoft are working to get that corrected and believe that they will be coming to a resolution soon. There's a bit of a time limit on this, though, because the acquisition must take place on or before July 18th. Otherwise, it defaults. The Microsoft will owe the initial acquisition money to Activision Blizzard to the tune of $69 billion, plus a $3 million penalty for not making it happen on time. Yeah.
So it paid $6,900, but then there's a $3 penalty.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's to that tune.
I feel like the judge ruling against the FTC. Now the FTC still has time to file an appeal. We'll see if that even happens because I mean it was kind of it's so much money on the table. It's hard to imagine the United States government not just let it, like, you know, everyone's making money on this deal. It's hard to imagine it not going through. But with the FTC losing the case, it being thrown out, this kind of puts the CMA honestly in a kind of a shittier position. They either have to soften their view or lose, like have citizens lose jobs because if the FTC approves this deal, it will go through. There's too much money and Blizzard will just close down its London offices. Yeah. Who gives a shit? Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah,
because it's not like they still can't sell in the UK. They can still sell their product in the UK. They just can't work out of the UK anymore.
So it'll just mean UK citizens lose jobs and whatever. I mean, it's Activision. Like maybe Microsoft might, you know, care a little bit, probably not. But there's too much money on the table. So they either soften their position or they don't, and they UK citizens lose jobs, and the acquisition goes through anyway. It becomes a losing position.
Florida.
Yeah. It does feel like Activision Blizzard and Microsoft definitely the ball's in their court. Yeah.
Like the eagle hasn't landed yet, but an old saying, it's not over till the fat lady sings. Well, she's warming up.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
and she's doing it quickly.
Yeah.
She is a consummate professional. Being that they only have, from the time they're recording this now, 6 days. They have less than a week to make this thing happen. Otherwise, it just flat out doesn't. So Activision Blizzard and Microsoft, I assume, are going to be crunching really hard to make sure they dot their I's, cross their T's, get everything in writing, and make this thing happen.
I think the market also reflects that how how serious this is.
Yeah.
I mean, Activision Blizzard rose almost 10% in its market shares. So that's follow the money, guys.
It is substantial.
Follow the money.
Yeah. So we'll see. There's speculation that this is probably going to happen at the beginning of next week. Like we may see this merger happen as soon as this coming Monday. So that'll be it'll be interesting to see. Now I think we've all made our points clear in previous podcasts that we're not necessarily super excited for this to happen, this massive conglomeration. But it is interesting to watch it unfold, and it'll be really interesting to see what comes of it. We are hopeful for the betterment of employment conditions at Activision Blizzard. We have yet to see, especially considering that Microsoft did another round of layoffs just today. It'll be interesting that they're acquiring another new company with all new people, and it's a large acquisition, obviously. But hopefully, being that Microsoft has seemingly been union friendly, we may see more unionization happening. I think that would be great. So we'll see. When it comes to employees' rights and enjoyment of the workplace, I hope this is beneficial, at least for the people that are making the games. Hopefully, we see better quality of life for them. That's my main hope in the whole thing. And then it'll be interesting to see like what comes to Game Pass, right?
Yeah.
Like I can definitely imagine Call of Duty on Game Pass.
Of course.
Being that it's going to be on every other major streaming service, I can assume it will be on Game Pass. We already know that there are no immediate plans to add Diablo 4 to Game Pass, and no immediate plans for like World of Warcraft to come to Game Pass. But I wouldn't be too terribly surprised to see like Overwatch, being that it's already free to play. I wouldn't be too terribly surprised to see older games too. Like maybe they launch StarCraft 2, that kind of thing for Game Pass.
What would be the benefit of putting a free-to-play game on Game Pass when it's already free?
Yeah, I was just thinking that myself.
Just, I mean, I guess it doesn't matter, but we also there may also what I imagine, because there's been talk of this before, is that the current launcher that Activision Blizzard uses, there might be some kind of Game Pass integration with that as well.
Yeah, probably.
Which is probably what's more likely to happen. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to say the least. I'm really interested to see what happens with the games, and I'm hopeful for the employees at Activision Blizzard that things get better. We think we killed that one for now. Like,
hopefully.
Maybe we're done. I mean, obviously, if there's big news next week that it doesn't happen or something, we'll bring it back up.
Yeah. Or if it does happen, we'll of course have to. I mean, talk about that then. But it might. I feel like we're nearing the end of.
They've had over a year since the announcement of the acquisition to like get ready for the launch event. When that happens, so maybe some big shit rolls down the pipes real quick. I know that gets Nick all excited.
Well, only if it's rolling down a funnel.
Yeah, or a barrel, I guess. So check your bungholes.
Gets me excited is video games.
True.
Yeah. What's up first on my docket?
You have the big release for next month.
The big release.
The big
release. Baldur, not of Slavic myth, but old 90s CRPGs, is coming out with his third gate. Finally, just a few weeks. Baldur's Gate 3 is going to be leaving early access here in the very near future. And after having avoided as many spoilers as I can, I've watched very little of the panels from hell that Larry and the studio has been putting out. I did break down and watch a half an hour long no spoilers video, listen to it about what is changing from early access to the 1.0 release, what they expect to be adding, and I flitted through a few other clips, and the general consensus is that by far easily the RPG of the year, contender for potentially a throne of best RPG of the decade, which is very, very, very exciting to hear. Divinity Original Sin 2 is the only other game by Larian that I have played, and that game has a hell of a lot of heart. Had its problems, but it was good, and I've heard really nothing but good things coming out of the Baldur's Gate 3 space as far as YouTubers and whatnot go. Besides a lot of user requested changes and fixes, bug fixes, there's new UI stuff. They've overhauled characters and storyline elements from the first act that's been in the early access test to be more engaging and interesting. And the most recent panel from Hell showed off their overhauled character customization, which is, if you've played computer RPGs, going to be roughly 80% of your gameplay time is going to be spent futzing with the face of your character. And this thing gives you a lot of options. I think I read somewhere that Drow alone had like 88 different earrings or something like that. It's a ridiculous number. But
if you know anything about Drow, that's honestly might not be enough.
No, that's yeah.
It's maybe adequate.
Maybe adequate. One really cool thing, besides having your own custom character that you can make and the preset characters that have their own storylines, they've introduced this idea. I've forgotten the what they call it off the top of my head. I should have had it pulled up. But there is a character origin story where you awaken with no memory other than the lust for murder. And every once in a while, your character loses control, and you don't get to control exactly what to do so much as decide on how you react to it after the fact. And it's a way for kind of finding a middle ground between a fully customized character with no built-in, baked-in narrative and the fully pre-made characters that you aren't able to modify, which is very interesting. It seems like if it's not going to be your first playthrough, it would make for an excellent second playthrough kind of character. On top of that, it looks like almost all the content from the player's handbook, the base book of D&D 5e, is in the game. They're up to 3-4 subclasses per class. They finally added in a handful of the remaining races. Just something like 1,000 interactable NPCs either in the game or in the city of Baldur's Gate alone. The YouTube video I watched wasn't too sure on the specifics, but either way, this is what Baldur's Gate should be, right? It should be nonstop content and lore and story no matter where you go in the world. There's always something going on, and you can just get absolutely lost in it. So I'm very happy to hear. Baby. Yeah, they got enough history.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff going on that coast of swords.
I swear to Christ, if we have to save Waterdavian creatures, I'm gonna lose it.
I hope there's just like a museum where they're all dead.
There you go. That's a good one.
Fun it out.
Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, like I wasn't terribly because okay. So listen, as far as Western RPGs go, like I liked Baldur's Gate 2 well enough. I didn't finish it. I have a problem with finishing such grandiose, large scale games. I just do. This is kind of rustling my jimmies a little bit though. Like you and I were talking a little bit in Discord the other night about the amount of subclasses and the classes there are. There's 12 classes, right?
It's 12 base classes.
Base classes, but 46 subclasses within those classes. And that is really impressive. Like, I just took a look at the cleric. I often play a cleric in our D&D campaigns. And I'm looking at the cleric. It's got 6 or 7 subclasses available.
So, all the base domains, law and order, nature, and all that stuff.
Yeah. And just because I started looking into the progress in Baldur's Gate 3 in the last couple of days, I'm genuinely excited for this game. Yeah.
They've also done other stuff. I mean, transitioning a TTRPG system to a video game does require some would call concessions. But one good thing I saw, in my opinion, stuff like the Monk, they've apparently tweaked quite a bit from its base paper and pencil model so that it's actually not a shitty class. Those kinds of things are good, in my opinion. You don't need to be faithful to the rules set of a TTRPG.
Yeah.
You just need to be able to port over what that TTRPG wants you to do.
Yeah.
Right? Each tabletop game is going to have rules that focus on what it wants its characters to be interacting with. And for 5e, that it is the Marvel of fantasy, right? High power, high fantasy. You are the heroes. Go save the day.
Yeah.
And I would have hated to have seen like a 1-to-1 transition of all the rules over from 5e because It needs some work.
It does, and it's good that they're using the bones of 5e, to begin with.
Blocks,
but that they're soft bones and they're malleable a little bit. So that's good, because at the end of the day, the most important thing here is not necessarily being faithful to the source material, just like you said. I think the most important thing here is that they make a good game with depth and gameplay. So
and this video reminds me, sometime through the first chapter of the game, you meet a character that apparently allow you to respec. And I don't just mean like skill points. I mean, like if you want to change your class and your origin story and your levels, like you get to tool and tinker around. You will not be locked in like you used to be back in the olden days. So there's going to be a lot of new classes to try, especially if you're not familiar with D&D. You don't know what you like yet. You're going to have that opportunity early on in the game to give them all a shot, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's good, because sometimes you choose a warlock and you don't care to be a warlock after a few hours. And
not everybody wants a astral sugar daddy.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Well, does anybody have anything else to say about Baldur's Gate 3? Because it's a big game, it's a big release, but we haven't played it yet.
I'm pretty sure it has multiplayer, right?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, so that's a first for most Western CRPGs like this. So that's going to be interesting to check out. I don't know yet if I just want to totally no grass touching solo play it first and then do multiplayer. I don't know. We'll see how it pans out.
Yeah, because getting us together sometimes can be a chore.
It works for about 3 days and then everybody gives up.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Well, Josh, let's talk about other forms of media for a second.
Yes. So today, which is the 12th, when you're listening to this, probably might be a day or two ahead there. But the Emmy nominations came out, and this really ties in because the receiver of the second most Emmy nominations was none other than The Last of Us. So now, it's not often that video games are both well received and video game movies, or adaptations are both well received and critically acclaimed. I mean, your Mario, but that's kind of pushed and geared towards kids. Your Sonic's, same sort of deal. Everybody loved Last of Us.
Yeah.
I mean, boy, howdy did they love Last of Us. It has gotten, so the lead actor here, Pedro Pascal, and lead actors, and Bella Ramsey, have both gotten nods. Ron Swanson, he got a nod for his role in the third episode. So what really this brings up for me is, if this is such, not just a financial success, but an acclaimed and rewarded, from a critic's success. Boy, what does that mean for future adaptations of video games, especially when one of the lead writers was Neil Druckmann, he's the co-president, he's the co-president of Naughty Dog. So he was one of the lead writers of the game, and now he's a lead writer on the show, and it's doing super well. Seems like a formula, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, maybe it'll get you Bowl out of making fucking video games.
Oh,
Yeah. We were. I mean, that missed the mark on being brought up a little bit, but we did. He chose again. We don't want to get into that, but it's like it seems like there's a successful model for video game adaptations, much like how Marvel Studios caught fire with Iron Man, right? I feel like this could maybe be for video game movies or video game adaptations, maybe like an Iron Man moment in 2008.
Hope so.
Yeah,
I feel like that would be phenomenal. Because they used a guy from the game and brought him in, followed what he said, and it was successful.
I mean, at the end of the day, The Last of Us did so well because it was such a well-written narrative already. They cast it appropriately, and they stuck, they weren't necessarily purists about it, but they stuck to the source material really well.
And to the feeling of it, right?
And they adapted what they thought might need minor changes without alienating the audience to TV. And they did an excellent job in the entire translation. Pedro Pascal's performance was incredible.
Right.
There was a moment that I have watched a few dozen times in that show, and it was wildly impactful at the time. And from the perspective of a viewer that's looking at, this is incredible acting. I was looking at Pedro Pascal and I said, that is scary. Mm-hmm. Joel scared me.
Yeah.
In the show. And it was having rewatched the scene from the game, the scene from the show did it better. And I think there are a lot of places in the show where things are done better because they're done by an experienced and talented actor who was cast.
I was going to say, like, as good as a game and it can make you feel like, there's few things that can emote like a human being can. And then when you get one who is just so fucking good at it, like Pedro Pascal, that's a fucking insta win right there. But I don't know. To me, it's just, there's a successful formula and things like success. So I feel like we might get some actual good adaptations starting to roll out now, which would be, I mean, I wouldn't say no to that. How cool would a fucking Metroid story be?
Pretty sick.
The game has like no story at all.
It's got very little.
That's true. That's true.
Make a great action movie, great horror movie.
Yeah, great, action or horror movie. Yeah, see, that's true.
It very well could be adapted. You definitely have to spruce it up for TV a little bit.
Be spruced up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, we'll find out how well movie adaptations do pretty soon here when Twisted Metal comes out on July 27th. So,
right. On the back of all these announcements, though, Naughty Dog is losing their other co-president. Evan Wells is announced he will be leaving the company after 25 years, I think it was.
A couple decades.
Yeah, since 1998, he's been at Naughty Dog. He worked on Crash Bandicoot, on one of the Crash Bandicoot games. Like the guy's been there forever. So Neil Druckmann is going to be moving forward now as sole president of Naughty Dog. How long that will last, who knows? I mean, Druckmann moved up in 2017, so I mean, he'll probably get another co-president eventually. But I mean, who knows? But it's a shakeup happening at Naughty Dog there a little bit.
They just got a lot of money.
I feel like they did just get a lot of money.
Yep. They got a lot of money. They have talented staff. Hopefully his replacement comes in and keeps faithful to what they've been doing, because I just looked up Naughty Dog issues and Naughty Dog controversy, and the only thing that comes up is a poor performance from The Last of Us PC edition in the first month.
Yeah, yep.
So when that's like the worst thing that your studio's done in its history, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of...
Yeah, wish him luck in his next endeavors.
Let's talk about good and bad inside the games industry.
Beyond Good and Evil?
That already did it, I guess. All right, next story. So study reveals a very low percentage of classic video games are available commercially. And this is something we've talked about regularly, but I've got some numbers to share here. So according to the, oh my God, what is their name?
Jeremy? According to Jeremy.
That's the one. I've fucked up. I had things highlighted appropriately, but I think I refreshed the page.
National Classic Video Game Association Council of America.
It's something like that. Essentially, they catalog video games. It's a video game library. It's really the Video Game History Foundation. They found that only 13% of games made before 2010 are available for legitimate acquisition on any platform. So 87% of all video game libraries are critically endangered is the classification that they are giving them officially, and could be lost in time if not preserved properly. Now, of course, this doesn't account for your small game shops that have good collections of classic games. But those are also at threat, in threat too, because as those consoles, they're with Super Nintendo games, with Game Boy games, if their battery corrodes and gets on the chips, it could kill them forever, right? So we're looking at more land waste, and it's the longer they are out there and they're not taken care of, the more likely it is that they just become land waste and they're unrecoverable for preservation. Now, one of the funniest things, I thought this was actually really funny, is they have a graph to show you how endangered these games are, and it's
God damn it.
they thought this was really important. Basically, it's Pac-Man. It's a pie graph. It's Pac-Man. It says 13.27% yes versus 86.73% no. Yeah, the preservation of video games, dude. We are looking at, it's very dangerous. Now let's check out this bar graph here. This bar graph, it's also just kind of a fucking joke. It shows what the percentage of games that are preserved versus not are, or at least they're commercially available are, and we're on a downward trend, folks.
From 1960 to 2009, the bar goes to 100%, and it caps out at like 18% in 1994.
Yeah. So yeah, because games, it's weird because all of the games used to be commercially available at one point. Like at one point there were 6 games and they were all commercially available. So this graph is wrong. But there is something to be said about the need to preserve video games, their history, their art, their development process, to make sure that they get cataloged correctly. And I think as copyright holders, man, like the U.S. copyright system, we need to change. We need a change because a lot of these games, the reason that the historical society or the historical foundation doesn't have them or can't, make copies of them is due to copyright and licensing issues. And the reason you can't get them commercially available is because you can't find distributors for them because their copyright is still held by somebody out there, and they aren't allowing it to be released and published. Now, we are getting to the point where like it's only going to be like standard copyright law lasts 100 years, right?
Some ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's I'm pretty sure it's 100 years. So, we're looking at the next, it's 2023, so we're looking at another 35, 40 years before any copyright on any video game lets up, right? And that's going to be for tennis, right? Yeah. And not for Pong. It's going to be for tennis. So it's a scary fact to know that there are some video games that and there probably already have been.
Yeah, they're just gone.
That are just gone, right?
So... hot take. This study either doesn't mention or it just hasn't mentioned it yet in the article that you've gotten so far, is completely ignoring the idea of video games as software. I personally think that losing the hardware versions of video games, while shitty, isn't nearly as big a deal as the concept of losing them entirely. Because like you said, you might not be able to commercially get a lot of these games, but I promise you a good chunk of that 87% of uncatalogued games float around on the internet.
Oh yeah, they've definitely been ripped, right?
So people like to collect, people like to hoard. There is no central video game curating body that is, as far as I know, like the be all end all of this, other than maybe them. And then there's also a museum in the UK that's not part of this article, but I just they're very small scale.
Yeah.
So the just point I wanted to make is a few things. One, it's not as big of a deal, just because of the idea that you can have a video game as a software version, people can still play it, and that's the point, right? Like it's not as bad as like losing all copies of a book. Two, it's a weird situation because as of the last 5-10 years, most culturally impactful video games are more and more games as service and live game service games. You can't keep those.
Yeah.
Once those servers are down, if the company doesn't left the code out, the game's gone.
Yeah.
Because it needs the code and the servers to run.
Yeah.
And these games as a service shut down all the time. The Cycle Frontier is shutting down, right, in August. It's just gone. Like unless you happen to have the code, or so like you pirate it and you make your own server, they're going to get played again. So we have this period of time from the 90s to the 2010s, 2015s, 20 years, 25 years, where there's a lot of games that we could curate and catalog and keep.
Yeah.
But sooner rather than later, unless you're looking at like indie games, no games are going to be able to be curated.
We actually had that issue already arise with World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
When Blizzard decided they wanted to do World of Warcraft Classic, they had to reach out to fans because they sold all of the old World of Warcraft server blades, and instead of preserving World of Warcraft as it was in its vanilla state, they built on top of that game what was to be Burning Crusade, and then the next expansion, and then the next expansion, and the next expansion. Those games didn't exist elsewhere. The only reason they were able to go back and do World of Warcraft Classic launch is because they were able to curate the game from a number of server blades that still functioned that they had auctioned off to fans, which, you know, thankfully they did that, and we got World of Warcraft Classic because people were clamoring for it. But what happens when these games go away? Like, because there's active copyright holders, they get to keep them, and the game just dissolves into nothing, right? So they own the IP, but you'll never see the game again. It's a real shame that we don't have some kind of entity that these games can be entrusted to, the IP can be given to or shared with, at least, so the active preservation can happen of these games, or at least their code.
Agreed. It should be going into into an archive or a museum or something, because honestly, in a couple of generations, when people when I'm telling in 30 years, when I'm telling some 8-year-old that used to play on a game on a cartridge, you know, it's going to be like telling him, like, you see that pigeon there? They used to deliver messages.
Yeah.
He's going to be like, whatever, Grandpa, fuck off. Like, you don't believe, unless there's a fucking thing where he can go and see it. You know, I mean, but honestly, it should just be preserved. Video games, especially in the last 20, 30 years, haven't just become a thing, like an entertainment like it is a cultural mainstay across the world. So, like, yeah, these things should be preserved. That's history, you know?
Definitely.
Yeah, I think we're most likely going to be seeing them in the next couple decades, reaching out to all these hoarders who have terabyte stacks sitting in their basement that just torrent stuff.
Yeah.
They just keep it.
Yep.
And they're out there. There's a lot of them.
God bless you.
Someday Jeremy is going to get a call from, you know, a company B that's like, hey, do you, we know based on your IP traffic that you downloaded a shitload of ROMs. Do you happen to have this one, please? You know,
there's people out there. I saw a torrent the other day for the entirety of Thomas the Tank Engine, like all of it.
Yeah.
Like every form of media that's ever come out. It's some massive multi-100 gigabyte torrent file.
Good.
It's like there are people out there. They keep this stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
They're saving everything.
Yeah. The hoarders will save us inevitably. Yeah. So yeah, just my final thoughts on that are just, you know, like, we don't actively promote stealing on our podcast. We don't talk too much about ROMs and emulation. But do it. Just go download ROMs, okay? Like, don't play them. Just have them.
Stealing requires somebody to be losing value.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
Dude, if it's a 40-year-old game or a 30-year-old game at this point, there's no one to make money off.
Yeah, there's
of
a
that
copyright holder holding it for no reason.
Yeah,
I would download a car.
It's already Donkey Kong Country already made its money, baby. Just go play the game.
No, that's Nintendo. They're gonna put it out again on their next. Yeah, they're gonna pay. They're gonna have a subscription service for you to pay.
So if you sneak it somewhere, it's okay.
If Nintendo wants to keep putting out all their old classics with every new console ad infinitum into the future, sure.
Yeah, that's fine. Whatever.
Right. At least they're doing their part to curate stuff.
Yeah. Well, anywho, let's talk about new games. Well,
let's talk about the second video game of the podcast.
Second video game.
I have, on a whim, got back into V Rising, the PvE, PvP action RPG vampire base building survivor like thangadoodle that we played last year, sometime in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, dude, we played that hot and heavy for like 4 or 5 days.
Yep.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Let's cap that off before I get frustrated. So I picked it back up on a whim, and I didn't realize it had a giant free major update, the Gloomrot expansion. I thought at first it was like a pale DLC, but I realized I was looking at just like a cosmetic pack. The game is still in early access, which I forgot because it's so goddamn well polished. And this is their first big update, and it's added just about everything from A to Z that you can think of. There's not just new content. The map is expanded. The levels are higher. There's new bosses. They've tweaked UI. They've gotten lots of quality of life things that I could spat on about, not including extra bag space for specific items. Your wolf form moves faster and has iframes when jumping. You can turn your horse into a nightmare so that you can summon it wherever you want. You can dominate people, and if you're high enough level, just teleport them to your castle so you don't have to escort them all the way back home. They've retooled things like quartz was a big bottleneck in the mid game, so they made a new quartz mine with a new boss there. And then, yeah, they've added in under what looks like 10, 20 levels of content, another dozen bosses, I think a whole new spell tree. All the spells now and all the weapon abilities can have these like glyph gems that modify how they work. Bosses at higher levels drop randomized upgraded gear, so there's reason to do bosses over again. And overall, besides that, you got multi-story castles now. Bridges, balconies, all kinds of stuff. It's very cool. But what I did is I've already played through the beginning of the game. We got about right in the beginning of endgame, I say, is about where you all dropped off. So I just cranked the drop rate of all the items up way, way high. You know, I kept the combat difficulty the same, but I have not had to farm any area more than once. I'm just blazing through, catching back up to where we were, trying out the new stuff. There's pistols now and great swords and all this fun stuff. And yeah, I'm loving it. I never did not like the game. So I will probably continue to play it solo to its completion. If y'all want to start a server, we can do that. But at the very least, I will be playing it because I enjoy it. And people should be playing it. It's cheap. It's a great game. It's fun. I don't know how it's still in early access. It's got, 50 hours minimum probably in your first playthrough of content.
It looks polished as shit. I mean, like it's I mean, in a good way. It looks great.
I mean, it was pretty well polished
before,
when we played it.
Yeah.
The first playthrough.
We had next to no problems. So, I'm enjoying it a lot. If you have it already and you haven't touched it since it came out, give it another shot. Check it out. It is worth taking a second look at.
For sure. Next up, Sega of America has unionized.
Oh, good
All
for
of
them.
Sega of America.
Sega.
Yeah, so very fortunately, the final vote to determine Sega of America's unionization took place day before yesterday on July 10th, as reported by IGN. More than 200 workers participated with 91 yeses and 26 voting no. 19 ballots were challenged and 3 were rendered void. Aegis CWA...
Sold that up to 200.
Yeah, I know. Aegis CWA is the union that they are participating in, and they are about to enter contract negotiations with Sega of Japan. So we'll see. Good. Yeah, man, we'll see what the result of that is. Just wanted to report on more unionization and the efforts of the gaming industry to unionize and get what they need, man.
Well, I mean, unionization, it's a hot topic. I mean, we're looking at tomorrow, the Screen Actors Guild, maybe that union hitting the picket lines as well. We're already in the middle of the writer's strike. I mean, yeah, unions are becoming like it is a talking point. So
it's a grinding wheel.
Mm-hmm.
Soon enough, we'll see it in retail. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, that'll never happen.
Yeah, no, probably not. Well, I didn't want to detract from vampires for too long because Nick. There's another vampire-related
Am I the one talking about games tonight?
Yeah, you are. I have industry news.
Yes, Vampire Survivors, a game that you might have heard about. It costs like a whopping $2. Is getting a pretty big double whammy update here next month. On one hand, they have been testing and refining the game using the Unity engine, as opposed to their old shitty engine that ran off of cockatoos and toothpicks. And users have been saying this new engine performs like a dream, no frame loss, even in late game when you're hitting billions of creatures for trillions of damage, which is fantastic. And once that hits full release, they'll put that in main branch. I think they're going to get rid of the old version, and the new Unity version will be the one to do. Great for everybody. Just means the game's going to run better late game. More importantly and interestingly, they are adding local co-op up to 4 players.
What is that?
That means
I have to bring my PC to your house.
Just everybody plays on one computer.
What?
And they said that the way it's coded, you can't share the keyboard, so you have to have extra peripheral controllers
So
and
like,
keyboards.
I
I don't
can
know
play
how
with the
that
keyboard
works.
and mouse, but then you could play with the controller.
Well, at the end of the day, like the game literally has like 4 buttons, up,
Okay.
down, left, right, and like there's like an enter button.
Okay.
And then I guess someone plays a controller. Andy and I were talking about. Don't really know how that would work with up to 4 people if you have up to 4 peripheral contact, keyboards or controllers.
Yeah.
The articles were articles based on articles based on articles.
Yeah, and
so
Why not just make it if you're gonna add
because
a
the game's
multiplayer?
not coded for online multiplayer. That's a whole thing.
It's a whole
Okay,
thing.
fair enough.
Which
fair enough.
they are constantly adding to Vampire Survivors, including like game derivatives of Vampire Survivors. So
If anything, they're going to make a second one with online multiplayer if the multiplayer is well received for this one. That would be my guess.
but it's also made it to consoles, so console players will have a relatively easy time. jumping into this.
Okay,
So,
that makes more
yeah,
sense.
so I don't know how. Like, to my knowledge, the PC can support 1 keyboard. Now you can have multiple keyboards plugged in, but it recognizes it as the keyboard. So
Yeah.
2 players press A, it's the same button. It's the same function. And Windows 10 supports, I don't know about Windows 11, but Windows 10 supports 1 gamepad or joystick at a time. So I'm not sure how that's supposed to work, but there might be some in-engine trickery that they're doing. I am reading a little bit further that there might be.
LAN doesn't necessarily mean local, right? Like, because I mean that's my computer
local area
and it's-
network. So it's any computer that's like hardwired on your network. So anything that's going through
So
your router.
if you brought your computer to my house, we could both play it.
No, because this isn't a LAN co-op. It's
Oh,
local.
it's local.
It's literally
But
that
lo-
PC.
Okay. I was just
You were
thinking-
right, but this is saying that it has to be on the one computer.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, again, this game is doing amazingly well. It's dirt cheap. Everybody loves it. Like the idea of them not eventually making a second one kind of boggles the mind. And knowing that it's as big as it is now, the only way to like keep that gravy train running is to make it multiplayer.
Yeah.
Right. You're going to start bleeding off if you just keep putting out single player versions of this because the bullet heaven genre is already flooded with games.
Yeah.
So
Like if you're like me and you have finished Vampire Survivors, I didn't play the derivative. I don't remember what it's called. You
the
played
derivative.
well the one that was made by the original developer of Vampire Survivors. There's a Vampire Survivors suffix title or a subtitle. I don't remember what it's called. But there is another Vampire Survivors game
High stakes.
made by the original developer. Sorry, I can't remember what the name is.
It's an Italian dude.
No, the name of the game.
I was talking about the developer. Sorry.
Yeah. I know. I was talking about the name of the subtitle of the game. Anyways, there is another one that caught my eye. We were talking a little bit about it on the balcony. Hell's Torment, which I think might be the next game I pick up. Being that it's in the same price range as Vampire Survivors, I think it's $4 on Steam. It's popping the fuck off right now, and it does add some really cool elements to the bullet heaven genre that haven't really been seen or haven't been seen all together in one game. It has very similar graphics to like the original Diablo. Don't expect anything mind blowing. You really can't with these games. There's too much happening on screen, mostly for too much graphic fidelity. But yeah, it really caught my eye. I accidentally found myself watching like 8 hours of Asmongold streaming this game the other day. And I was entranced like the entire time. It has a few elements that I haven't seen in Bullet Heavens, like in fun ways, like things that make sense in the gameplay loop. Like you can pick up like unique rare items that empower your character and drop them in a well so they can be purchased by another currency later. There's, I believe, 6 playable characters right now, and they all play really differently, which is nice. Vampire Survivors did the same thing initially, but they're, with as many characters as they have now on their roster, there are a few that effectively played nearly identically. Where this one, they feel quite different. Like there's an AOE class to begin with, like an AOE damage over time class. Yeah, and really, really cool stuff. So you might want to also check out Hell's Torment. It's in the same
cheap.
vein. Yeah,
I just got
it's like
done
$4.
with Spirit Hunters, which was like a just absolutely solid B+ bullet heaven game. The only problem is its meta progression got really grindy. But the gameplay itself was really fun. A lot of fun stuff. So yeah, a lot of them out there. 20 Minutes Till Dawn also finally had its full release.
Ooh, okay.
Brotato got put on Android. I've been playing that.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
I know that. Yeah, there's so many. Yeah, there's so many. Yeah. Brotato wasn't necessarily up my alley. I just didn't get into it, but
it's quick.
It is quick. Yeah.
There's like next to really no meta progression, so you know it's fun to do.
But it's really easy pick up and go. Like you don't have to devote the time that Vampire Survivors takes. Like a Vampire Survivors run can definitely take at least 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, it caps out at 30. Yeah. Spirit Hunters capped out at I think 15. Which even then, you know, you do 2 runs, it's half an hour.
Right.
Brotato, you get done in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, so if you're on a bus, Brotato is the one to go.
Yeah.
The one to go with. Anyways, I think that's about it for the news this week and discussion. Yeah, you guys feel good about it? I do.
Yeah. Oh, I bought Far Cry 6. I started playing it. It's Far Cry. Story's story's pretty good. I like Giancarlo Esposito. Just he does Sinister so well. There was a weird thing when you're in any base. It forces you into third-person mode. It doesn't fucking tell you this is happening. I spent 10 minutes trying to figure out what the fuck button I hit, trying to get the fuck out of third-person mode, and then I'm like on Reddit, and it's like, inexplicably, you're in third-person mode for storytelling reasons, so I can see my fucking outfit or some shit. Tell me that. That's fine. I don't give a shit about that. But it's like all of a sudden, like, dude, like the cutscene ended. I wake up in my fucking thing and I'm moving around in third person. And I'm like, oh, I must have hit something. I literally stopped playing the game and tried to figure out how the fuck I was going to change my perspective. And then once I was like, I don't know if it's going to go back or if it's just in the base. Then I walked out of the base. Like out of the base area, and it jarringly puts you back into fucking first person view with your gun out. And it's just like, it was the first time it happened, it was physically jarring, and I did not like it. But otherwise, I've been enjoying playing the game.
Ubisoft has to make sure they piss you off at least a little bit, assuredly.
I went on a weird rant about it there.
It's frustrating. It bothered you.
Yeah.
Ground your gears.
Your gears are ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.